York's only local show is back on its new home on York's only local station.
Guess who's back again.
This is the Gary Sutton Show on WOYK.
I'm back.
Now, broadcasting live from WOYK's downtown York studios inside Wellspan Park, here's Gary Sutton.
Thursday, February 13th, the day before Valentine's Day, 7:05 here on the Gary Sutton Show on WOYK. It is 33 degrees on Brooks Robinson Plaza.
A lot of melting going on.
A whole lot of melting going on. And so we're ready to move into hour number 2 here. You can text us throughout the show, 833-478-4729, on anything. If you listen to Chris Markowski this morning, if something hits you out of the news, let us know what you think about that. We are interactive. We'll get back to you very quickly. We love to see those texts throughout the course of the day. You could also answer the question that I have on the Gary Sutton Show on Facebook, where it is, are we in a constitutional crisis? That's the question. A lot of people are saying that. You heard what Chris thought about it this morning, but what do you think about it? Today is also National Internet Friends Day, of which I've never been into the Internet Friends thing. I don't know.
You got to meet someone face to face, right?
That's what it is. I got to know, and then maybe I'm a friend with them. But I'm not. That's a later generation thing for me. I don't know.
How about food holidays today?
Go ahead.
Now, this one is a little out there because not everybody, I think, likes this.
Okay.
But National Crab Rangoon Day.
I like crab rangoon.
It's okay.
Pretty good. Yeah.
National.
They don't have that at Waffle House, by the way. But
No, they don't.
No.
Well, they should.
No.
National Tortellini Day.
I like tortellini.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nice little.
Hitting all my notes here today.
Which is kind of like Rangoon, if you think about it. Just one has crab and the other one has, well, it depends on what it is.
One is silver, the other is gold.
And the big one today, the big food holiday.
Go ahead.
So I buried the lead. National Cheddar Day.
Oh.
Cheddar.
Oh. Okay.
Out of all the cheeses, Swiss, Stilton.
We were out at Yanni's yesterday, and my wife ordered Greek cheese balls.
Is that something she's had before?
No, we never had them. And it was a light, like almost like a French fry crust on the outside, but a very light. And the inside, it had this wonderful cheese. It was not mozzarella, but a little bit tangier cheese.
Okay.
I want to tell you what.
Not like feta?
No, it wasn't feta. It was kind of like being in puffs of cloud. You could picture the angels singing.
Listen
You were
to
in heaven
that.
floating
Puffs of
around.
clouds.
Yeah, it was that was it. It was really, really good. The kind of thing that Joel Sears might like. Joel Sears, of course, citizen activist, former school board member, former president of the York County Taxpayers Council, all-around swell guy, is with us here this morning to break down the governor's budget a little bit. Good morning, Joel. How are you?
Doing well, Gary. How are you?
I'm good. Now, we've had dinner with Joel and Jenny, and just lovely people. And I know Viet Thai is one of your favorite places, but are you a cheese guy at all? We've never.
Oh, I absolutely am. Yes.
Okay. Do you have a favorite on your list there, Joel?
Love cheese. Well, I like the cheddar family, especially the really sharp cheddars.
Oh yeah. But
I'm into blue cheese and a few other weird ones too.
Well, I'll tell you what. If you ever want to go over to Yanni's over there in the West Manchester, or whatever it's called now, town center. It's this gyro place. I had the best gyro yesterday over there, but they have these cheese balls, Greek cheese balls, and I mean, I tell you what, I would take it from a small child. Seriously, I would wrestle a small child for this cheese ball. Or I'd say, hey, look a deer, and then I grab it. I mean, that's how bad it is. I'm ashamed of myself to even say that, but, that shame left the building some time ago if I got the cheese balls in my hands. So there you go. Anyway, you were fired up this morning with Chris Markowski, right?
Well, I was, and I think he puts his finger on a lot of things that really have relevance everywhere, especially in the Commonwealth. I mean, we talk about this place where the records are stored and the amount of time it takes to move records into that being the element that chokes up retirements. That was one of the things I read, that they can only process a certain number of these things at a time, and that slows down the retirements from the federal government. Because you have to be able to store these documents.
Who decided we're going to store documents in a cave? I mean, for all intents and purposes, this big tunnel or this cave or whatever it is. I mean, where did that come from?
I think it might sound a little goofy at the outset, but If you want records, Gary, on somebody that was in the federal government prior to automation, you better have a safe place to store the records.
Well, that's true. Yeah, maybe that's
We've
it.
had fires over the years that have knocked out millions and millions of records, for example, for military people. So
Right.
if you have a claim, you're dead. The bigger question is, why are we still doing it with paper?
Right.
That's the thing that just boggles the mind. And 700 people managing that?
Yeah,
Great.
I know. It's just, and again, we get back to the idea of we just do it because we do it. Because we did it. Because we do it.
Momentum.
Because
Yes.
we did it. Yeah, and it's just that's the problem, is that we're in a battle right now. It seems to me, with doing it differently or doing it the same way. That's one of the other sub battles that's going on here. I think with the whole Doge idea and all that. And I'm not saying one's right, one's wrong, but it just seems like that's where we're at right now. Do you see it the same way?
Yeah, let's apply that at the state level for just a second.
All right.
We have just cracked $50 billion. The governor's budget is the first one that's higher than $50 billion. It's gone from around 47, 48 to 51, a $3.57 billion increase, 7.5% over the current year, which is way higher than inflation. And we don't have the growth in the state to justify that. Collections theoretically will be up. A good bit of that is based on new sources of revenue and changes in what they call the tax structure, where you get taxes. We're currently taxing something, but you change the way it's taxed. And income tax is one of those. The rate's going down, but it's being applied more broadly. We're also going to transfer money from our rainy day fund. We're going to draw down the balance. So there's what I think a lot of folks would call a structural deficit that's being covered with some of the money that's been set aside in past years. Granted, that is taxpayer money. This stuff didn't grow on a tree. So in a sense, it's a return of taxpayer money. It turns out to be that's one of the worst ways to run a budget. Put it in the savings account, but then draw it down to support your operating budget. Not a good plan, because it doesn't take long before that completely blows through the fund balances.
Hey, let me ask you a question, just being a simpleton for a second, monetarily. When we have a big surplus like we have right now, all I hear in my mind ringing around is, did we overtax, or have we somehow made money there in a certain way? I don't want to condemn Caesar with faint praise, but do we have a situation here where we have overtaxed? And if we've overtaxed, don't we deserve to give people back some money? Because I've always been a great believer, and again, theoretically, that the more money you have in the hands of the people, the more organically the economy works. Your thoughts on that?
I think you're right. I think the idea, though, of a budget, let's say we're talking $50 million, and that's really not all the money that flows through the state. This does not take into account billions and billions of federal money that are not part of the general fund budget. But think about this, Gary. You got a $50 billion budget. Let's say that you're running a business that has a $50 million budget, and you're trying to do a very detailed analysis of where the expenditures are going to be in the upcoming year. As appealing as zero-based budgeting is to those of us that like to put accountability on the hands of our government officials, the budget line items are in the thousands. And this is another part of the problem. There's so much detail. Some of these budget line items are less than $3,000 or $4,000, and yet there they sit. And it takes the same amount of effort to justify a $3,000 line item that's buried in some obscure agency as it does to justify another, say, $500 million in the basic education fund budget.
Haven't you just put your finger on exactly where one of the main arguments is right now on the whole Doge type attitude, this idea of making government more efficient? And people are saying, what do you mean? It's only $3,000 here. It's only $4,000 here. It's only $6,000 over here. It's only $10,000 over here. And you start to add that up, and all of a sudden, then it's only $1 million over here. It's only $1 billion over here. It's, and you think to yourself, well, wait a second. That's somebody's money. Did we treat that with the respect that we would treat it if it were our own money? And that, to me, is one of the biggest things missing from the way government operates right now, and could operate so much better if we started to use that whole private sector principle of, okay, the government is the extension of the individual and the family. Why do we say that it somehow can be different and operate in a different way? I've never understood that, and I never understood that chasm that we jumped over to allow them to operate the way they're operating now when we look at $37 trillion in debt, for example.
Yeah, it gets there $1 at a time. Let me ask you this, Gary. You're walking down the street You just got out of your brand new car. You look down, and there's 8 or 9 coins in the street.
Right.
A quarter, a dime, a couple nickels, and 3 pennies. What do?
I pick up everything with the pennies.
Why not the pennies?
Because the pennies are worth nothing right now to me. Unless,
right, but in this
unless they're
analogy-
heads up, by the way. If they're heads up, there might be a shot at it.
In this analogy, they're steelies, all right? So
Right.
the point I'm trying to make is you don't just pick up the quarter and leave the other stuff on the street.
Right.
And Doge is trying to pick the whole thing up. Mm-hmm. The pennies, the quarters, the nickels, the dimes, and even the occasional Morgan silver dollar laying in the street.
Great point.
And that's where I think people have a problem with rationalizing what's going on in federal government on either side of the spending ledger.
No question.
Well, it's only a few $1 million. Let's move on to one that's where the big money is. If I told you could save half of a $3 million budget versus a 0.5% of a $30 million budget, which one would you look at? You got to go where the money is.
Yeah.
And these wasteful, redundant organizations, at a minimum, need to be questioned.
Yeah.
At a minimum, they need to be questioned. They need to be rejustified. They need to be repositioned. Why would we have 8 or 9 or 10 agencies doing the same thing?
I've often said if you go back and you use a zero-based budget kind of mentality, and you say to Congress, okay, let's look at every line item veto on every single area of the budget every year, you'd have people laugh at you. They'd look at you and say, you nuts? But the idea that somehow all of that is okay each year and we just move on and add on to it, to me, that is not an efficient way to run government. Now, I realize the other one takes a lot of work, but I also realize that if you put the kinds of principles in place and the kind of machinery in place, it wouldn't be all that hard to be efficient each year, to go back and look at every dime. Is there something now that's redundant? Is there something, for example, that maybe doesn't really fit anymore? Is there something that's ancient, like you just mentioned a little bit ago with hand toting these retirement things around? So I'm just saying I'm not, and I don't even think it's a Republican, Democrat, or left or right thing anymore. I think it's just, let's keep on operating the government the way it is, and the status quo is fine, versus let's do some new stuff here to kind of hold them accountable and make sure that our money is being spent in a responsible way.
It sounds way too easy, doesn't it?
It does.
From the standpoint of this is what we need to do. If you look at the budget from the very highest level and you start, consider that it's a pie. Whether it's the state budget, the school district, you name it. You've got a pie that's a certain size. For whatever reason, we think it's okay for that pie to grow as long as the growth rate isn't that big. Instead of looking at the pie, we're just looking at the little ring around the pie that represents the growth. You got to stand back and look at the whole thing at some point. The piece that's called personnel, for example, grows and grows and grows in many cases without hiring people, but because of the way we pay the people. We assume that we have to give everybody a small raise every year. So over time, 10 years, the budget goes up 20, 30% with no increase in productivity, simply because we have to pay more. You move up the pay scale, you get paid more money.
Yeah.
You were let's say, a beneficiary of that when you were a school teacher.
Right.
You know how that works. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me honestly that all the teachers got that much better every year as their pay went up?
No. You
but
couldn't
the
say
pay
that.
went up, and the taxes had to go up to support it.
It kind of reminds me of like in the movie Christmas Vacation, Clark Griswold expects a bonus every year, though it doesn't say anything about the amount of work he'll do every year in terms of increasing and so forth. And of course, he gets enrolled in the Jelly of the Month Club then, and that kind of goes down the drain. But anyway, we're right at the end of our time this morning, Joel. But can we continue picking this budget apart? Because there's a lot of the national stuff that's kind of working its way in, I think, to some of the state stuff here as we talk about this. I think it's important to talk about it. And again, I don't think it's Republican, Democrat. I think it's more of the mentality about how we're doing our government right now. And I think that's something we need to keep on kind of examining and dissecting a little bit. And I appreciate you taking the time to do that this morning. Let's look forward to do it again next week, okay?
We'll do it, Gary. Thank you.
My friend, thank you so much. Joel Sears here on WOYK. It's the Gary Sutton Show this morning. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the news you might have missed. Might not be true, but, we put it in anyway. And Mark will have a few more things for you, too, including what time his reservation is at Waffle House for tomorrow night for Valentine's Day. All here on the Gary Sutton Show on WOYK, where it is 7:19.